Okay, so welcome everybody. I can see that we've got 18, 19 people on the call already. So thanks a lot for joining us, taking the time out. The first hangout of the NIHR Incubator for Emergency Care. Really great to have this, and we've had a fantastic uptake as well. So we opened 60 places for this and all 60 went, which is amazing. So thanks for your engagement and enthusiasm, everybody. Brilliant to see that there's so many people interested in research in emergency care. I'm Rick Boddy. I'm leading the NIHR Incubator for Emergency Care, which we started last year. We've got also some other faculty here. I'll just let everyone introduce themselves. So first of all, I'll just let you know I'm a Professor of Emergency Medicine and based in Manchester. Julia?
Hi, I'm Julia Williams. I'm Head of Research for the College of Paramedics, which is our professional body, and I do my clinical in South East Coast Ambulance. I'm also a Professor of Paramedic Science at the University of Hertfordshire.
And we've got Heather.
Hi everyone, lovely to have you all here. My name's Heather Jarman. I'm a consultant nurse in emergency care and a Professor of Emergency Care based in London at St George's. So lovely to have you all.
And we've got Charlotte Minter.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Minter. I'm one of the Senior Programme Managers working in the Infrastructure and Capacity Building Structures team. That just doesn't roll off the tongue very easily, I'm afraid, at the NIHR Academy. And really that team delivers a national programme to support and engage NIHR Academy members and encourage collaboration between NIHR infrastructure centres, as well as more recently supporting the newly established NIHR incubators, to which obviously emergency care is one of them.
Great, so we're really privileged to have such a fantastic faculty to join me today. We have now 24 people on the call. I imagine that'll go up as time goes on. You will find that on this Hangout, you can't talk, so we can't hear you, but you can use a few different functions to get our attention and contribute, and it would be fantastic to have some interaction and some chat. In fact, that's what we hope to achieve today. So you can see three functions. There's the chat function. If you open the chat function, you can see some messages already, and you can send messages either to everybody, just to the panelists, or I think you can send it even to just one individual on the call if you want to. So use that for anything as we go through. And then in particular, there are two functions that we would like you to use for discussion and questions. There's the Q&A. If you open that on the top sort of bar that comes up on Zoom, you'll get a Q&A panel. You can then ask questions by typing them, and if there are any questions, we'll answer them between us. We'll come back to them. And then finally, you can raise your hand. So there's a function to raise your hand. If you do that, that'll flag to us. So yeah, I can see that somebody just then, I can see a few people raising them and putting them back down. If you raise your hand, then we can give you the mic during questions, so then we can hear you, and you can ask your question and the panel can answer that question. So those are the functions that we're going to use as we go through to hear from you and get some interaction. I'll just move the slide on. Hopefully you can see my slides. This is the plan. So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte from the NIHR Academy, and Charlotte's going to give us an introduction to the NIHR Academy and the fellowship scheme. So tell us about the fellowships that are available to us in emergency care and when those calls are open. I'll talk a little bit about the NIHR Incubator, about what it is and what we hope to achieve. Then we'll hear from Heather and Julia about what that means for nurses and AHPs. After that, we'll stop for some questions and discussion, so feel free to contribute. That'd be great to have your input. And then we're going to part two, where we'll talk about how to write an excellent fellowship application. So again, Charlotte's going to share some pearls of wisdom from the NIHR Academy, and then we're all going to chip in with some contribution about how we think you can prepare an excellent fellowship application. And then again, we'll finish off with some questions and discussion. So we've earmarked an hour and a half. I appreciate some people might drop out towards the end, that's okay, but we've got plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. So that's the plan. And at this stage, I am going to hand over to Charlotte to tell us about the NIHR Academy and the fellowship scheme.
Lovely, thanks, Rick. So really just wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about the NIHR Academy and the various training and development awards we offer. So the NIHR is the largest funder of health research training in the UK, and it does this through the auspices of the NIHR Academy. So the Academy really invests in people because we're really wanting to develop a highly skilled academic workforce capable of tackling the complex health and social care challenges of the future. And the Academy plays a vital role in research capacity development and building capability as well. And we offer a large range of awards at different levels and to suit different work arrangements, professional backgrounds and career pathways. So I'm not going to go into detail in terms of the remit. There's quite a hefty amount of text on that slide, I know, but basically all the research funded by the NIHR as part of a training award that is managed by the NIHR Academy must fall within this remit. So basically early translational, clinical and applied health research, including social care research. So I won't go into detail about the whole remit. This is available on the NIHR website and also in the various guidance notes for each of the different schemes. But if anybody is unsure whether their research idea and project is within this remit, we're more than happy for you to discuss this with us over the phone or via email, just to reassure you, because we'd hate you to put an application in that was outside of remit. So the NIHR Academy provides training and career development funding across the whole research career pathway, which this slide really shows, right from initial pre-doctoral training, right the way through to our more senior awards, the chair research professorships. So we really do support people throughout that whole pathway and with a clear dedicated pathway for all professionals interested in research. So I really just want to focus on the top two of those sort of schemes, what we call fellowships for all, which are fellowships available for all professional backgrounds, as well as the healthcare professionals pathway, which are available, which is part of the integrated clinical academic programme, the ICA programme, aimed specifically at non-medics and dentists. So if we just move on now to the fellowships programme. So the 4 fellowships detailed here have been designed to support individuals at various points of their development, from right the way from initial pre-doctoral training right the way through to the more senior advanced fellowship, and including a new development and skills enhancement award. So if we just focus now on the pre-doctoral fellowship. So this has been designed really to support people who are looking to start or advance a career in health research methodology. So for example, medical statistics, health economics, qualitative research methods, clinical trial design, that type of thing. The award provides salary for the applicant and training and development costs, and can include master's fees if applicable, as well as supervisory costs. But I really just wanted to make you aware that this fellowship isn't open to clinical applicants looking to undertake training in research methods. Those clinical applicants, looking to develop a career as a clinical academic need to look at the ICA programme really. So moving on to the NIHR doctoral fellowship. So this is open, say, to all professional backgrounds, so clinical medics and dentists, or healthcare professionals. And it's a 3-year award that supports individuals to undertake a PhD in any area of NIHR research. And it really funds salary, research costs, including the PhD fees, and training and development costs. The fellowship can be taken up on a full-time or part-time basis between 50% and 100% WTE. And clinical academic applicants can actually include up to 20% clinical time as part of their fellowship to ensure maintenance of their clinical competence whilst undertaking the fellowship. We now have 2 rounds a year of this fellowship, one opening in October and another one opening in April. So if we move on to the advanced fellowship. So this is open, yet again, to all professional backgrounds, but is aimed at the postdoctoral level. And that can be utilised at several specific points of a researcher's career development. It's a fellowship that can be taken between 2 years and 5 years and funds salary, research costs and training and development costs. And yet again, this can be completed on a full-time or part-time basis between 50 and 100% WTE. So we really are quite flexible with the fellowships. The advanced fellowships are available with a clinical academic option where clinical applicants can request up to 40% of their time to be dedicated to clinical service development, which will be covered by the award. And yet again, we have 2 rounds of this, so one in October and one in April. And then if we just move on to the Development and Skills Enhancement Award, this is a relatively new award that we've now instigated at the Academy to really meet people's needs. It's a postdoctoral level award aimed at supporting NIHR Academy members to gain specific skills and experience to underpin the next phase of their research career. So applicants really do need to demonstrate what new skills and experience they hope to gain through this award and how it will benefit their future career in research. And this award provides 1 year's full-time funding for salary and training and development costs. And the benefit of this is it's open 3 times a year, in January, May and September. So that's really the 4 main fellowship awards that as part of the Personal Awards Fellowships Programme offer. So I now just wanted to move on to the Integrated Clinical Academic Programme. So the ICA programme is managed by the NIHR, but is funded by Health Education England. And that offers a range of awards for registered non-medical health and social care professionals who wish to develop careers that combine clinical research and research leadership with continued clinical practice and clinical development. Applicants must be one of the ICA eligible professions and hold registration with the professional body council for that profession. Like the fellowship scheme, the ICA scheme also supports people right from that initial predoctoral training right the way through to the more senior clinical lectureship fellowships. So if we just start with the predoctoral, what we call the PCAF. So this is a great opportunity for people who are really enthusiastic and interested in research to develop a competitive doctoral fellowship application whilst undertaking master's level academic training and maintaining clinical practice. This can be undertaken on a full-time basis for 12 months or a part-time basis over 24 months or over 30 months. And the award funds salary, time undertaking the fellowship, as well as supervision and mentorship costs and training and development costs. And there's 1 round of this every year, and that tends to be in January, February time. Then we progress to the Clinical Doctoral Research Fellowship, which allows people the opportunity to undertake a PhD whilst developing clinical skills. And it covers 3 years full-time funding for salary, research costs and costs of a tailored clinical and academic training and development programme. As part of the CDRF fellowship, 20% will be devoted to clinical practice and professional development, because it really is about encouraging that professional development and becoming a clinical academic. And there's 1 round of this every year, which always is in March. And then if we move on to the clinical lectureship and the senior clinical lectureship, these schemes really support the postdoctoral non-medical healthcare professionals. And there's 1 round a year of this, which is always in March. The clinical lectureship is aimed at people in their early stages of their postdoctoral career and wish to establish themselves as an independent clinical academic researcher over the course of the award. With the senior clinical lectureships, these are aimed at people who are established independent clinical researchers and not yet recognised as leaders in their field. So both the clinical lectureship and the senior clinical lectureship require support from both a clinical and academic host organisation that will work in partnership to support the clinical academic career of the award holder over the course of the lectureship and post-award. So the awards have funding to undertake a 50-50 clinical academic position, splitting their time between clinical practice and academic research. The funding covers 50% of the award holder's total salary, research costs and training and development costs, including clinical development. The clinical lectureship is a 3-year award if undertaken full-time, and the senior clinical lectureship is a 5-year award, irrespective of WTE, and may be taken on a part-time basis as well. So in summary, I just really wanted to emphasise the main benefits of a fellowship as opposed to undertaking a research project grant. A fellowship really is a great opportunity about developing you as an individual and as a future research leader. And it gives you the opportunity to undertake a challenging piece of research and include full salary support, allowing you to protected time to really concentrate on your research, as well as funding your award holders' research costs, but most importantly, support the development of a bespoke training and development programme to meet your individual needs and career development. So the main benefit is that it's unique to you and to get you to be a future leader and where you want to be. So that's really all I wanted to focus on in terms of the award side of things.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. So I totally agree with what you say about how useful the fellowship scheme is, because I was a clinical lecturer and then an NIHR postdoctoral fellow, and can say exactly how much they did for me, help my academic career. I moved from the postdoctoral fellowship to a university chair, and there was absolutely no chance to have done that without the NIHR fellowship. So I wanted to say a few words now about the NIHR Incubator itself. We had a launch last June at the Royal College of Emergency Medicine headquarters in Octavia House. So I'm going to go over a little bit about what this is all about and tell you what the scheme is. So what is an NIHR Incubator? Well, the NIHR published a strategic review of training in 2017. You might remember that the NIHR Academy was previously called the Trainees Coordinating Centre, and it was rebranded as a result of this strategic training review. In that strategic training review, there was a statement about having NIHR incubators, a little section, and they defined them as networking structures to support capacity building and multidisciplinary career development in priority areas where critical mass is low. So I read that and spoke to Alistair Gray, who is the chair of the ARChem Research Committee, and thought, well, that kind of describes emergency care pretty well. Priority areas where there's a high need and a low critical mass. Because I think we clearly do have a high clinical need in emergency care. We are the front door of the NHS with over 23 million emergency department attendances per year and vast increases in the number of 999 calls and emergency department attendances in recent years. But at the same time, while we face such pressures clinically, we actually have a very low critical mass of clinical academics. So we looked actually with ARChem at how many people there were in the country who had a university chair in emergency medicine, and we found that there were just 10. And we compared that to other places. So in New York, we heard that there were 30 just in that one place alone. In Paris, I think it's similar. They've got more professors of emergency medicine than we have in the whole country in the UK. So we're coming from a low critical mass for the amount of pressure that we face clinically. And if we really want to address the pressures that we're facing, then we absolutely need good research to do it. So this incubator scheme seemed designed for us really, high clinical need and a low critical mass. So we decided we'd express our interest, applied to the NIHR Academy, and we were very lucky to be one of the first incubators designated. So it's truly multidisciplinary. It's emergency care, which embraces everything to do with our approach to clinical emergencies, whether that's doctors, nurses, paramedics, physios, other NMAPs, all are embraced by this incubator. Just want to illustrate exactly how big a problem we have with critical mass. So one of the first things we did after setting up the incubator was to have a look at how many trainees we've got with an academic interest at the moment. So how many people hold NIHR awards? And we looked, this was just at doctors first of all, looking at academic clinical fellows. So across the whole of the country, we found that we had just 13 academic clinical fellows. And this is, you know, our future. We know that some of those will drop out. So 13 is a very small number, really. In terms of clinical lecturers, so postdoctoral research, we actually only had one in the country, which was Gordon Fuller in Sheffield. And I think Gordon's moved on and been replaced by another. So we've still got one clinical lecturer in the whole of the country, and no advanced fellows whatsoever, which is amazing, really, for a specialty with that much clinical need. We just don't have that many people doing research. What about NMAPs? Well, we don't know. That was quite a hard question to answer. We just haven't got the intelligence on how many people there are out there. We know there are some, but we don't know exactly how many. And we have no way of uniting everybody together who's doing research in this field to try and create a community of researchers interested in emergency care, so that we could support each other and learn from each other and succeed in our academic careers. We've not just got a low critical mass, but we're also approaching things quite differently across the country. So we sent out a survey to all of the integrated academic training leads in emergency medicine across the country and asked them a number of questions about their academic clinical fellowship program. So the academic clinical fellows get 3 or maybe 4 years to spend a quarter of their time doing research alongside clinical training, and hopefully building up to a PhD application. So we asked a simple question: when those ACFs are in that fellowship placement, do they have to complete their clinical training in the same time as their full-time clinical colleagues, or do they get a bit of extra time because they're spending a quarter of their time doing research? And the answer was quite enlightening, really. Almost a 50-50 split, or as 50-50 as you could get, with 4 regions saying that they did have to complete the training in the same time as everyone else, and 5 saying no, they have to spend a bit longer because they're doing research. Total split, showing a heterogeneity of the approach. And that's one of the advantages of having an incubator, is that by forming this community, people with a common interest, we can actually try and get a common approach to how we train people in research and emergency care. So we set up the incubator. We've been meeting on not quite a monthly basis, but regularly. So I've been leading the incubator. It was the Royal College of Emergency Medicine that applied for the incubator status. So in a way that they're kind of administering the incubator. And we have Jason Smith, who's the chair of the research committee at Arkham, and Dan Horner. Heather's our nursing representative. Julia's representing the College of Paramedics and the National Ambulance Research Steering Group. We've got Damien Rowland from Paediatric Emergency Medicine. Kerry, who's on the call, as a physio representative. We've got great support from the National Institute for Health Research Clinical Research Network and Steve Smythe. And fantastic representation from the NIHR Academy and a lay representative in Martin Rolfe. So what will we do as an incubator? First of all, what we hope to do is highlight opportunities for people working in emergency care to undertake research as part of their career, so have a job where they do research alongside clinical work. Perhaps one of the problems is we don't always appreciate that the opportunities are out there. So the incubator can help to show people what those opportunities are, and then help them to make successful applications to the different schemes that Charlotte's just told us about, and when they get those fellowships, to actually succeed with the research that they're going to do. And lastly, in doing that, we want to provide really great mentorship. And I want to talk about that a little bit more as we go on. What will success look like? If the incubator is successful, we hope to be able to demonstrate that we've got more clinical academics in emergency care, that we've got better academic training that's targeted to people in emergency care, taking account of our specific requirements in emergency care, the intensity of the shifts and so on, the approach that we need to take. So we target it more to those people who are doing research in this field. And in particular, another great benefit of this is that we'll be more embedded in the NIHR community. So this is a multi-professional entity, and we also hope that it will help us to build better links with other specialties as well. So Heather, I'm going to hand over to you now. you made a really great point when we were planning this, and that we use the term clinical academic, but don't necessarily define what we mean by that.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks. Yeah, Rick and I and Julia and everyone else were really having a discussion around what clinical academic posts are about and what they mean. So we often talk about clinical academic training pathways and clinical academic roles, but certainly within the sort of nursing, midwifery and AHP community, they are few and far between. And some of the work that I'm doing alongside this with the NIHR is to try and look at how we can truly embed those clinical academic roles. But this is the National Institute of Health Research definition from 2016, which is really about how important it is that researchers are embedded in the practice setting, but also embedded some way in academia so that we can try and combine the clinical and research career. So there's a few examples of these roles in emergency care. So consultant practitioners or consultant nurses in terms of NMAPs would be some. Rick could give you some examples of posts like his, which are split across both the sort of HEI institutes or educational universities and clinical practice. But, you know, as Rick touched upon, what we're really interested in the incubator is trying to link clinical academics together, or aspiring clinical academics together, or anybody really who has just got an interest in research. So one of the things, as Rick said, that was really telling was who was out there doing academic work in emergency medicine, and in particular in emergency care. So it would be great to know who you are, and definitely what we want to do in the incubator is try and make some links. So I sit in a sort of an academic unit which is hosted really by an NHS organisation, and it's a very lonely place sometimes, and I know that lots of you who are involved in research might feel that when your clinical colleagues are very often driving service and where you're trying to drive evidence into practice, sometimes it can be really quite challenging. So wouldn't it be great if everybody sitting in posts where they are clinical academics or would like to be a clinical academic, we can link those people up and offer advice on how you forge that career, because it's a lot of it is about how you set those posts up for yourself, and we can talk a bit more about that later. But we just felt it was a really important way to try and define what we're talking about here. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Heather. So at that point, we're going to just stop for a moment. Julia, I'm not sure if you got anything you'd like to add from a pre-hospital care perspective at this point, and then we'll stop for some questions.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really around just reiterating some of the things that have already been said. There's such a need to bring this community together in a multidisciplinary way, because when I look amongst the allied health professions, there is an enormous amount of work going on within the professions, and also trying to blend those together as well. And I don't know whether people are familiar with the Council of Allied Health Professions Research Network. It's called CAPA, and it represents all of the allied health professions. So what we're seeing in the allied health professions is that bringing them together makes us much larger in numbers, and then therefore that gives us better networking. It's a force to be reckoned with, and it gives us opportunities to integrate then with other healthcare professions. But I think again it's around people not knowing what's out there, and it's really important that with the incubator that we get this message out to our clinical colleagues and our academic colleagues. Because I think, Rick, you're right, that one of the key roles is about highlighting the opportunities that are there, because so many people, I think, are working in isolation. And I'm not talking about silo working, they're working in isolation in research, particularly in the paramedic profession, where we're seeing a really strong increase in building of capacity and capability amongst our potential and actual researchers. But the networking and the bringing everybody together, I think, is lacking. And this will be one way, I think, that the professional bodies can link into this incubator and almost act as a conduit between their members and here, and help hopefully promote research opportunities and networks across internationally, actually.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really important point you made about the bringing people together so we have a larger community. You mentioned that for NMAPs and also particularly within emergency care as well. All of us together will be stronger. So we've got two questions that have come in, I can see. One is from a question for Charlotte. As a non-UK citizen, can I apply for the advanced fellowships postdoctoral level?
Okay, so in terms of, as long as you have a contract of employment with a host organisation for the duration of whatever fellowship you're wanting to undertake, so if you're wanting to undertake a doctoral fellowship, as long as you have a contract of employment with a host organisation, so with a higher education institute or a NHS trust for the duration of the fellowship that you're wanting to undertake, you know, we'd more than welcome a fellowship application from you.
Great. So that I know is from Abdul, who's doing a PhD with me at the moment, and Abdul's on a scholarship from Saudi. So he'd be interested in taking that up. So it sounds like he would be eligible.
Yeah, I say as long as have a contract of employment with a host organisation, so if that be with yourself, Rick, with the University of Manchester for the duration of that doctoral fellowship he's wanting to do, yeah, we definitely welcome an application from him. Right,
great. Hopefully that answers your question, Abdul. Follow up if you need any more information, but that sounds.
I was going to say we're more than happy. I say we definitely encourage you to, if you want to have a greater conversation around that, to get in touch with the NIHR Fellowships team. So the telephone number is on the NIHR Academy website, and yeah, we're a member of that team are more than happy to discuss eligibility criteria with people over the phone or via email. So yeah.
Fantastic. We've also got the contact number at the end of these slides, and we'll make the slides available, which was another question that came in via the chat. Will we make the slides available? Yes, we will, and we'll also make a recording available. So we've got another question. The second question here is from James in Scotland. Does this great programme of opportunities also apply to Scotland? Charlotte, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the devolved nations, so Scotland and Wales, obviously have their own health boards. They, on a regular basis, so in advance of each round of fellowships we contact Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales to ask if they want to participate in our fellowship schemes. So depending on their priorities, they will either participate or not, and we will advertise that on our website in terms of which devolved nations are participating in the fellowships. The process is that you would apply as part of our standard application form, and that you would progress through the system as per an applicant based in England. But if you are successful and the selection committee deem you fundable, your award would not be managed or funded by us. You would then be funded by whether that be Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. And they would look after your award if you were if the selection committee deemed you fundable.
Great. I think that is a great question, because we actually asked that the first meeting we had with Dave Jones and Lisa Cottrell at the NIHR Academy when we were thinking about getting an NIHR Incubator and hoping to get one. We asked about devolved nations, and just similar to what you said, Charlotte, they do have their own schemes. So in actual fact, the answer was that really this scheme is related to England. But as this was being run by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, what we were keen, and Alistair Gray was chair of the research committee at the time, we said that we were keen from the outset to try and see what we can do to make sure that this involves all of the devolved nations as well. And certainly all of these activities, we wouldn't all of our resources that we're going to produce, we're extremely keen to make sure it's open to the devolved nations, and hopefully Charlotte's answer about the fellowship schemes will cover that your specific question, James. Anything else? There's another question here. So from Bangi, would urgent care research be classified under emergency care too? And if so, would this include non-NHS employees? I would say yes for a start, absolutely. So with the incubator, for a start, we were keen that we don't just include clinicians and health professionals in it. So actually, whether they be methodologists, statisticians, even engineers, any professions that are doing research, health research in emergency care, we were keen to embrace that. Urgent care, I would say, does fit within our remit. Heather, Julia, would you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. It definitely does fit within the remit. And if you look at certainly some of the NIHR calls, it is urgent and emergency care. So, and that ties in with the clinical workload across those groups, but also, you know, with the kind of commissioning drive and everything else. So yeah, it would be urgent and emergency care, definitely.
Yes, I would just reiterate that. I think it's absolutely unanimous from the panel that they would be both included.
Great, so hopefully that clears that up. In terms of non-NHS employees, I think it's straightforward that the fellowship scheme is open to non-NHS employees. Charlotte, would you agree?
Yes, so it's open to anybody employed by a higher education institute, NHS, a local authority. Yeah.
Great. Next question is from Shashank. What are the options to grow a career in research if you don't have time to undertake a PhD programme, but at the same time conducting a small volume of academic work locally? Oh, really nice question, like it, because that's something that another thing that we've talked about. So yeah, how should we tackle that one then? Anyone want to take a first dibs on that one?
I would probably just say from a HEI perspective, you would need to be assigned to some sort of programme or PhD pathway. There are options to do things like PhD by publication, but I would say the volume of work required to undertake any sort of level of PhD programme is probably the same regardless of the route that you take. So not doing a sort of formal taught or a supervised PhD programme doesn't mean, and doing it by publication doesn't mean that it is less work, is all I would say. But I think there are other ways to develop going back to the point about you don't actually have to do a PhD to grow your research career, and certainly in the first instance, that's not, you know, from my experience, that's not how I started. I did a PhD reasonably late, having done small volumes of academic work locally. So there are opportunities that are still open if you're not feeling that you have the time or you're currently at the level where you want to do a PhD. But it would be worth trying to link in, if you have one, with obviously people at the incubator like Rick or Julia or I, depending on your professional background, but also trying to have a contact with someone in an HEI about what body of work you're doing and what it might be able to contribute if you'd like a formal academic award. There are plenty of people out there without PhDs who are doing research.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And I think depending on where you're working, and I'm not sure where you're working, but it's good to actually contact either your research and development departments, or if you're linked to universities, as Heather was saying, whoever is leading research in those departments for urgent and emergency care, to see what's going on in the area. I think also, again, if you are part of the allied health professions, you can contact your local hub for the Council of Academic Health Professions Research, CAPA, because they will put you in contact with people who are like-minded. The other thing to consider, and I know we're talking about the NIHR pathways here, is that not all doctorates are PhDs, and there are professional doctorates, which some people, that I don't think that's any less time, but sometimes it is more malleable in terms of linking that into the work that you're doing full time. So it may be worth looking at some of those options as well.
Yeah, and I'd just also like to add to that. I don't know if Shashank is medical or non-medical, but actually, when we first started the incubator, Steve Smythe, who's a cluster lead at the NIHR CRN, made a really good point that actually he was very, very keen that we make sure that we reach out to full-time practicing clinicians as well, and we increase opportunities for them, whether that be campaigning to find ways to get some protected time in people's job plans to do research, or whether it would be supporting them to conduct research alongside a full-time job. That's something that we'd like to work on at the incubator. It's not our core business, it's not what the NIHR Academy has told us to do, because primarily we're here to support fellowship applications and to support people who are holding the awards to be very successful in creating their research careers. So people who are going down the formal PhD route. But I think that in time, the things that we produce will hopefully aim to give you more opportunities to do research alongside your full-time job plan. And there's loads of initiatives going on already to try and find ways in which we can achieve that. It's quite complicated. But for example, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine has a strategy, a research strategy, and included in that is an aspiration to have a research lead for every emergency department in the country who has protected research time. So there's lots of work going on it, and hopefully we can support it via the incubator as well. For now, in terms of practical advice, what you can do if you're a doctor, you could speak to your local NIHR CRN lead, find out about opportunities to get involved in portfolio research. Sometimes the CRNs have fellowships and PAs that you can take up, and speak to your R&D department, see what the opportunities are. The best thing to do is try and build a bit of a track record, I think, first, and then negotiate where some time for it. It's a bit easier that way around.
Rick, can I just also add into that the other organisations that might be worth looking at are things like the applied research collaborations, the ARCs,
yeah,
because they are working with clinicians in their geographical area and funding some, not necessarily smaller scale, but they are looking at smaller scale through to large scale pieces of research. So it may be worth contacting them as well to see if there's people you can link in with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's worth pointing out that there is an urgent and emergency care theme for the ARCs at the moment. So well worth touching base to see what there is locally that you might be able to tap into. Let's move on to the next question. Are there likely to be any PCAF type opportunities coming through for medics? I could quickly just answer that one and say as a consultant, I see. Okay. PCAF opportunities for medics as a consultant. Charlotte, what do you think about that?
No, because the PCAF and the what we call the ICA pathway are purely for non-medics and dentists, so all sort of other allied health professionals. So if you are a doctor, it's the fellowship program, and also the integrated academic training pathway on my previous slide with the NIHR research career pathways. There is a whole career pathway for doctors and dentists, but also linking very much in with the fellowships for all. So if it is that pre-doctoral level, definitely looking at the doctor and dentist pathway on that previous slide I had.
Yeah, great, thanks. And we've addressed some ways to get some protected research time as well. For the last question, approaching your ARC, the NIHR CRN, R&D department, and so on. So hopefully that will give you some ideas about a way forward. Be happy to help again if you get in touch with us using the contact details that we'll share. Let's move on to the next one. It's a question for Charlotte. So if I've done a master's overseas, would you recommend doing the pre-doctoral clinical fellowship first, or go straight into the doctoral fellowship?
It's entirely up to you, and if each scheme will offer, a completely different help to your career. So if you're more than welcome to apply for the PCAF. You wouldn't necessarily want to do master's level training again, but there will be other training that you may want to do in order to put in for a competitive doctoral, either a clinical doctoral fellowship or a doctoral fellowship application. So it's how comfortable you feel, either wanting more training that you feel that you want to make yourself better equipped to do a doctoral fellowship application, or if you feel that you've already sort of got some experience and skills from doing your masters, yeah, we definitely welcome a doctoral fellowship application with you. It's probably worth getting in touch off this sort of webinar in terms of with the NIHR Academy, just to have that conversation with you. You're more than welcome to speak with somebody within the ICA team. They can sort of better advise you personally on what that master's included and what and how and where you are in your career and sort of CV and do. But neither way would be the wrong way, so to speak.
Great. Hopefully that answers your question. It looks like there's a similar question on the chat actually there to that from Tony, who's not a UK citizen but has an employment contract with an NHS organisation. Published a paper. Currently, main reason he's come to the UK is to pursue a clinical academic career, looking for a mentorship opportunity and hopefully a master's degree and a PhD. What path would you advise? And it looks like Tony has a nursing background.
So definitely the PCAF. Sorry, is this wanting to undertake a master's? Sorry, Rick, did you say?
Yeah, it's come through on the chat, so I'm just having a read of this. It does look like Tony, you'll be able to hear us here and point out exactly what it is, but it looks like you haven't got a master's yet. You've got published a research paper and looking to pursue a clinical academic career and hopefully, hopefully a master's and a PhD.
Yeah, so no, definitely in terms of an employment contract, as long as you have a contract of employment with either a HEI or an NHS trust, that's absolutely fine. It's just because we will be the Department of Health will be contracting with that host organisation. So as long as you've got something for the duration of that fellowship, so if you're a PCAF, definitely would be something we'd strongly encourage you to apply for, because it will give you that opportunity to undertake master's level academic training in order to prepare a competitive doctoral fellowship application. So yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it sounds like that a PCAF application would be a good first step. I mean, bearing in mind there are other ways to approach an academic career, but in terms of this webinar, I think it would give you the support you probably and mentorship you could probably use.
Yeah, really sort of build, like you say, really building that supervisory and mentorship team, so that, you know, matching your skills and interests and where you're wanting to develop your research career. Because yeah, it gives you that time to properly prepare for a doctoral fellowship. So yeah, but whilst also maintaining your clinical competency. So if you're a nurse, that's great. Okay,
fantastic. Let's move on to the next one. There's a large population of research active ED clinicians, like the SHED study. So this is run by the Trainee Emergency Research Network, or is being run by the TERN. So SHED study where there's 100 emergency departments represented, a massive success story. How can current research active clinicians delivering portfolio work be better acknowledged outside the opportunities described? Or is the point that everyone should use these pathways? Well, I'd say absolutely not. You don't need to use these pathways. Everybody has a different course. If you want to have a job in the future where there's a significant part of your working life going to be devoted to doing research, then you should, I think, absolutely commit yourself to this career pathway, the clinical academic career pathway, which is, I'd call it. Hopefully that's the right term, Charlotte. But I'd absolutely go for it. Go down this route. Because it's the best way to make sure you're going to have protected time for research in the future. But it's not the only way to do research in your future working life. Plenty of people are research active clinicians and plenty of them have protected time in their job plans. And as I mentioned earlier, RChem is campaigning to make sure that at least one person in every emergency department has some protected time for research. So we definitely want to increase opportunity for that. We've talked about some of the ways you can get that funded through, they can be local, they can be through the NIHR CRN, they can be through ARCs and so on, that give you a bit of time. You can also get research grants. So that's a really nice way that, for example, my colleague Dan Horner, who leads TERN, got started with his research. Well, he did an MD and then he was a full-time consultant, but he managed to get protected time initially, I think, by getting an NIHR HTA grant, which funded a couple of PAs of his time. really nice way, because it's externally funded, for him to get some protected time within his job. Julia, Charlotte, Heather, anything to add to that?
No, not from, yeah. I think it is, you know, there's all sorts of different ways you can get involved in research, and I say whether that be one of these more formal fellowship applications where obviously we're really wanting to develop future leaders of research, but also, you know, just actually helping on a trial in terms of recruiting patients and being a principal investigator or a clinical investigator and things. There's lots of different ways you can be sort of research active, and it's sort of recognising that not one pathway or one option will suit everybody. So yeah.
Great. Hopefully that answers your question, Rebecca. And then the last question we've got for this section is from Ben. Is there a type of applicant for the clinical and senior clinical lectureships, i.e. in training or completed training, or for medics at least, an established consultant or new consultant if you're post-PhD? I could start that off on. I think Charlotte, you'll give some more informed insights than me. But as I understand it, the clinical lectureship at least can span CCT, but was designed, I think, to start pre-CCT. Is that correct, Charlotte? Still?
Well, in terms of the ICA program, I say that is purely for non-medics and dentists. So that is the whole scheme is for allied health professionals. But if you are a consultant, to say there is the fellowship program and the IAP program that would be, you know, for, you know, that we would encourage you to apply for. So the ICA program in terms of the clinical lectureship and senior clinical lectureship are purely, I say, for non-medics and dentists. So all allied health professionals, so that you wouldn't be eligible to apply for the ICA program if you are a consultant or or registrar. You know, so if you're in the medical profession. But to say that the NIHR fellowship program, so the advanced fellowship program, if you are at that postdoctoral level, would be applicable for yourselves, and also I say the IAP pathway as well. Yeah,
and within that, probably as Ben as a consultant in emergency medicine, I think clinical lectureship is not designed for yourself, but the advanced fellowship, as I understand it, would be the one to go for, and would totally revolutionise your research career if you've got a PhD. And I can say that from experience, from having a postdoctoral fellowship. I was going to go for that and the clinician scientist, and the postdoctoral fellowship came out first. I got the postdoctoral fellowship. Gives you 60% of your time to do research for 5 years. You can do a huge amount with that, and it just totally changed my career. So I'd think about that, Ben.
Rick, it might be worth just putting the slide, if you could find my slide on the NIHR research career pathways. It's probably, I think it's like the 3rd or 4th slide in the start, sorry.
It's okay. I could probably find a better way of doing it with the right click, but I'm worried about my slides going off the screen. There you go.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, lovely. So I say I've just focused on talking about the very 2 top pathways. So fellowships for all, which I say are open to all professional backgrounds. So medics, dentists, allied health professionals, statisticians, epidemiologists, etc. So that is a pathway for all professionals, right the way from pre-doctoral through to chair. So that's what I spoke about firstly, but then I also discussed the healthcare professionals pathway, so the one below in the sort of pinky colour. So they're purely for allied health professionals, so not medics and dentists. So when I was referring to the clinical lectureship and the senior clinical lectureship for that pathway, medics and dentists wouldn't be eligible to apply for that pathway, but I say they would in terms of the fellowships for all, the green pathway and also that orange pathway, which are purely for doctors and dentists. So there is a clinical lectureship for doctors and dentists, but not one that I was talking about on my slide set.
Great, thanks for that. Let's try and get back, go to slide. We've got one more question, which I'll come to. I'm just going to try and get back to where we are. There we are. So last question here we'll take for this section, and then we'll move on. It's from Sasha. I've completed an NIHR funded ClinRes. I don't have a high level any high level journal publications as yet, but would like to apply for the CDRF. Can I apply before I get anything published, or should I wait and only apply after publication?
I don't know what background you are, Sasha, but I would say you should certainly consider applying now. It's not the sort of longevity in terms of sometimes the pathway to get published is slightly longer. Sorry, I'm going to mute my speak. So I certainly would start applying now, is what I'm saying. I think there's other ways to demonstrate impact and output other than publications, which you might be able to put it within your application, but also you can outline within the application any sort of plans, dissemination plans that you might have but haven't yet achieved.
Yeah, I would absolutely support that. And the other thing to highlight to people is if you're presenting at conferences and other events like that, where it's been peer reviewed, you've been selected, that is the sort of thing they're looking for in terms of this course. I mean, Sasha is actually on a paramedic, and I do know that you are presenting a lot, Sasha, so definitely get that in there.
I would definitely take Julia's advice then.
Yeah, and I would, in terms of, publication is one of the things obviously the selection committee will be looking at, but like my colleagues have said, there are lots of other ways that you can be sort of showing them that you're on a career trajectory, because that's really what they're looking for, to see that you're committed to that clinical academic career, whether that be travel grants, awards, presentations, things like that. So anything that you've really sort of achieved that way definitely would be obviously considered by the selection committee as well as publications, obviously. So yeah, it's just a whole range of different things. So yeah.
Great. Well, that brings our round of questions to a close. Really nice. Thanks for all the questions. That was terrific. Let's move on. And in the next part, we're going to talk about how to build an excellent fellowship application. So again, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Rick. So we all know that securing funding to carry out health and social care research is really challenging and really competitive. And we would strongly encourage applicants to read the guidance notes for whatever fellowship or award you're wanting to apply with the Academy thoroughly. There's a lot of information on the website. It may be a little bit information heavy probably, but definitely all the information you need is in the guidance notes. If there are any queries that you have, I say we're more than welcome to take calls or answer emails. And also we'd strongly encourage people to get in touch with what we call the NIHR Research Design Service. I don't know how familiar everybody is to that service, but it's a great service provided by the NIHR, and they really support health and social care researchers purely, though, across England, I'm afraid, on all aspects of developing a fellowship application. So they right the way from research design, research methods. They'll also help you identify funding sources. So whether that be a fellowship or also a project grant with the NIHR, they know our schemes inside and out. So they're a great source of information. Their advice is free as well, and if you get in touch in advance of when you're wanting to put in a fellowship application, they do face-to-face appointments with people and sit down and go through applications, and sort of getting them involved early on is definitely worthwhile, because they do have a track record of improving people's funding applications. And we always say this, talk to as many people as you can. There's a lot of people out there, obviously, people, especially people on on this webinar as well. They've had fellowships themselves. They're academics. They know a huge amount of useful information for what people are looking for in applications and things. Look up, if you're wanting to apply for a doctoral fellowship, look up the selection committee there. There may be somebody that's in your organisation that sits on that selection committee. Get in touch with them, ask their advice, get in touch with methodology experts, collaborators, and start having these conversations early on, as well as mentors and supervisors. I'll come on to talk more about the supervisory team a little bit later, but really talk to as many people as possible and do this as early as possible. So if, for example, a fellowship is opening in October, you know, don't leave it just a few weeks before the application window to get in touch with these people. You really need to start talking several months in advance if you want to put in a really competitive application. So, yeah. So that's in terms of pre-application advice we definitely give to people. And we often, you know, we've obviously had fellowships for a number of years now, and over the course of these years, we've seen some really sort of common weaknesses in applications. So I just wanted to take this opportunity just to sort of go through some of those. So our training and career development awards focus very much on the individual and their needs, because what my needs are may be very different to your needs. So they really are a great opportunity to develop some skills and interests, you know, that are bespoke to yourself and your bespoke training plan. Competition for fellowships is high, so you really need to demonstrate why what you're wanting to do is important. Why should the NIHR invest in you and your work? You know, most importantly, a good application explains clearly and coherently why the applicant needs an NIHR fellowship and at which stage of your career, you know, whether that be a doctoral fellowship or an advanced fellowship or a PCAF, you know, why at this stage you're looking to apply for that fellowship and why a fellowship as opposed to a research grant as well. So if you can really clearly and concisely explain, you know, why what you're doing is important, why the fellowship's important to you and where it's going to take you on your career trajectory. But most important, you really do need to align yourself with the best of the best, especially at PhD level. So your choice of supervisors and mentors is really important, and I couldn't emphasise that strongly enough. That is one of the key things that the selection committee will be looking at. So you need to have experts, you know, in the area that you're interested in and in the methodology you tend to use. So, you know, you would find often people have supervisors and mentors that the selection committee really can't see why they're a supervisor or a mentor, you know, and you really need some people who have supervised people successfully throughout their PhD fellowship, really getting, say, the best support and aligning yourself, you know, with a really great supervisor and mentor team, because not only will they help develop your research skills, but also you and your personal and professional career development, because that's really what a good mentor will do, helping you get through that next career trajectory level. Also, one of the common, you know, sort of mistakes people make is in terms of their training and development plan. That's critical. You know, often people consider this as sort of as an afterthought, and they'll put sort of random training courses within their organisation that, you know, and haven't really invested in taking the time to sit down with those supervisors and mentors to identify their training needs. So a really well thought through training plan, you know, needs to be at the front and centre of your fellowship application rather than just an afterthought. So you need to consider, you know, really a range of skills you need to gain to progress to the next stage of your career, and not just sort of technical know-how to complete your project. So they're looking at for a complete package that's, you know, unique to you and your personal development. The selection committee really want to see evidence that you've assessed gaps in your skill set, you know, for example, what you need in regard to, you know, furthering developing your abilities and building capacity, you know, at this more senior level, you know, looking to lead a team, to communicate to a range of audiences, different media, and really patient and public involvement often is an afterthought. So it really needs to be, you know, embedded and woven throughout your whole application, not just a few sentences at the end where you may have spoken to the odd patient. So yeah, in terms of common weaknesses, I think that slide really just captures in terms of some of the key things that we found over the years that people have fallen down by, but the training and development and getting an excellent supervisory team that's surrounding you and supporting you is key to an application, and, you know, what the selection committee will be looking to see. So more recently, in terms of the NIHR fellowships, we've the chair of our doctoral fellowship selection committee, Professor Gary Frost, and the chair of our advanced fellowship selection committee, Professor James Parry, have both done a really great blog in terms of what, over the years they've been chair, they've seen, really good applications, really outstanding applications where people have, have really excelled and gone on to develop research careers and research leadership. But they've also seen, unfortunately, some really poor applications where people have, there's been key weaknesses that I've sort of highlighted previously. So they've both really produced a great blog that really highlights, their personal insight into what the committee is looking for when they come to sort of shortlisting for interview, as well as what they're looking for if you reach that interview stage. So I definitely encourage you to have a look over those blogs, because there's some great sort of tips and hints in there. We've also got what we call NIHR advocates, so I'd encourage you to go on that website link at the end of the website, the webinar, and have a look over that, because they're NIHR academic training advocates. They really are ambassadors for clinical-led research and clinical academic careers. So they promote NIHR training and career opportunities and support clinicians embarking on or developing their own research career. And if you are an aspiring or early career clinical academic, or an organisation wanting to develop clinical academic careers, the advocates there are definitely worth getting in touch with, and they're down there by professional background, so they're grouped in, say, certain professional backgrounds. So yeah, definitely take a look on that website. It's a great resource. So yeah, make the most of those resources, the blogs, getting in touch with the academy, reading guidance notes thoroughly. There's we definitely encourage a lot more fellowship applications in emergency care. So yeah, get going.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. On that theme of mentorship, and then talking about the NIHR advocates and now talking about mentorships, we wanted to talk a little bit about what the incubator can do about mentorship, and then Heather's going to say a few words about how to make sure that you get the best mentorship. By the way, there's no emergency care theme yet on the NIHR advocate page. So that's something we're going to look into, and it might link really nicely with one of our first initiatives as the incubator. One of the things that we realised when we set up the incubator is that if you were interested in a career in research in emergency care, but you don't work at an academic club, given that there are very few academic clubs of emergency care around the country, well, you've not got many options really. You might have to move to one of the academic clubs if you want to pursue your research career, but not everybody is geographically mobile, and it doesn't always make sense to move to one of those places to do the research that you want to do. So we realised we wanted to do something, or we needed to do something about that. So what we've done, and what we're in the process of setting up, is a national database of mentors in emergency care. So very shortly, we'll be releasing this national database online. We've got around about 15 mentors now signed up to our national scheme. This will be hosted on Arkham Learning. The Arkham Learning site for the NIHR Incubator in Emergency Care has just gone live, actually since we started the webinar. So we'll send the link around to you so you can see that page. And on that site, we're going to post this national database of mentors. There'll be a profile of each mentor. And what you'll be able to do is have a look through at who the mentors are that might be available and willing to mentor people pursuing a career in this area, and see if that matches your research interest and what you're hoping to achieve. So hopefully this kind of matchmaking function will mean that people can actually get really good mentorship. Really importantly, you don't necessarily need to have somebody with the same professional background. So doctors don't need to be mentored by doctors, nurses don't need to be mentored by nurses necessarily. It's about having the strongest mentor, whatever their professional background. And they don't necessarily need to be in the same geographical location as you. So keep an eye out for that. That's our national mentorship scheme with the incubator. I'll hand over to Heather now.
I just wanted to say a couple of words on this role of a sort of clinical academic mentor, which comes up certainly in the sort of PCAF applications and the sort of doctoral fellowship applications. And just to sort of echoes Rick's point, this will be a real strength, I hope, of the incubator for potential applicants and fellows who are working in institutions where maybe there isn't a particularly strong emergency medicine research research portfolio or sort of academic institutions attached to your sort of host trust. So I've been mentor for a few, clinical academic mentor for a number of NIHR fellows and PCAF fellows, and I think sort of guidance from the NIHR is that they need to be suitably, you need to find someone who's suitably qualified, so someone who's got a higher academic qualification than the applicant, which can be difficult, and those people, as Rick alluded to earlier, we know who they are quite often in emergency medicine. We're less clear about who people are working in emergency practice or emergency care or pre-hospital care, and that certainly will be one of the strengths of the incubator and the mentorship database that we've talked about. Your selection can be based on a number of things. Certainly, you know, it's sometimes about having somebody who knows about your research topic area, but sometimes it's equally about knowing the area or having clinical area expertise. So most people on this call, I imagine, will be urgent and emergency care clinicians of one variety or another, but equally you may be looking into areas that are slightly outside of your normal clinical practice and where you need to link in with somebody else. So one of my PCAF students is not working in emergency departments, but is looking at headache in emergency departments. And actually that's where my clinical area expertise comes in and links in with her headache expertise. So don't necessarily think that you have to be working in exactly the same clinical area. I would say it is important to try and look at the breadth of your researcher development when you're looking for someone who can support you in these mentor and clinical academic roles. So what I mean by that is, you know, what else do you need apart from doing a formal academic training? You know, how else can you get involved in things like broader NIHR activities? So things like possibly attending NIHR meetings, shadowing mentors at committee meetings or advisory groups. So if you try and link into people who can give you a much broader experience of the world of being a clinical academic, if you like, that goes beyond maybe the research, those types of applications can be quite strong in terms of saying, it isn't just about me delivering this particular research project, it's about me becoming a clinical academic in the broadest sense. So involvement in sort of policy influencing, committee work, any of those things where maybe you can go and shadow your clinical academic mentor. And obviously one of the key components we touched on very early in this webinar was about, I guess, the dearth of actual true clinical academic posts that there are. So one of the things we're really keen at supporting in the incubator is how, when you finish these formal fellowships or formal NIHR programs, that you then go on to continue that clinical academic career. So having your clinical academic career provide guidance and support to how you might forge your way in that area is really, really important. Thanks, Rick.
Okay, Julia, hand over to you.
Yeah, okay. I think this is around highlighting, and obviously that's a very busy slide. This comes directly from the website. So when you're putting an application together, I cannot stress enough that you need to look at the criteria that the selection committee use for assessing your application. I mean, in general, they're looking at your research idea, they're looking at you, but they are also looking at your choice of clinical mentor and also academic supervisor. And as we heard earlier on, you know, the quality of and the relevance of your proposed training and development program. So I would just suggest that you have a look at that on the website. But that slide, we'll move on to the next one because I am conscious of time as well. As was mentioned earlier, also there needs to be some evidence of value for money, really. But do look at these, do have a look at that, the guidance that's on the website, and then actually apply it. And I would have to say, having been on some of the selection committees myself, that I think you as the applicant almost have to take a little bit of responsibility to make sure that your supervisor is really selling themselves in terms of meeting these criteria. Because if we have a look at the next slide, the sorts of things that they are asked to include, and it's fairly clearly written, but sometimes people don't, the supervisors don't put this in. I think it's a big ask for the supervisor, because certainly on the doctoral level qualification, doctoral level fellowship, there's quite a small section for that, whereas interestingly on the PCAF there's a larger section for them to stress the sorts of things they're being asked here. For me, in a PhD or any doctorate, the most important relationship is that I had in mine and that I have with my students is the supervision relationship. You need to demonstrate that you've thought this one through and that you've selected someone, just as Heather was saying, in terms of the clinical mentor, that it's someone who's appropriate. They need to demonstrate that your work is going to fit into their developing program of research, that they've got the right expertise and that they have a strong profile to actually be in that position of supervising you. They are asked about PhDs. Now, put in brackets, what about other forms of doctorates? Because I think that is a question that we need to be asking the NIHR, because growingly people are supervising other doctoral level qualifications, not just PhDs. But whichever one they're doing, you need to be able to demonstrate that your primary supervisor has supervised to completion, because the NIHR or any funding body, whether you're going to a charity for funding to do your fellowship, they need to see that they're investing well and wisely. And if they've got unknown quantities in terms of maybe really eminent people who may not have supervised people to completion, I think they see that as a challenge and in terms of their risk ratio and increased risk. Just as Heather has said, the working around, it's not just the academic supervision, it's about the other things around your supervision that you might experience through being linked in with those supervisors, how they can link you into other research networks, collaborations, perhaps again shadowing at various committees or other roles that they do, maybe getting involved in talking to other students, maybe doing some lecturing around the research methodologies that you're doing in the institution, all those things that build up this sort of overall roundness of a future career, a future research leader, really. So do look at what your supervisors are putting and make sure they are putting what they're supposed to be putting, and really encourage them to sell themselves well, because we did hear earlier on that actually this is a critical part of what the NIHR are considering when they're selecting people to be funded. I think that's that slide. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Julia.
You're welcome.
So here we've got contact details from Charlotte and the NIHR Academy. So when we share these slides, you'll have a copy of that. And that brings the slides to an end. So we're going to open up again to some questions. Hopefully that gives you some really nice insights into how to make an excellent fellowship application. So if you have any questions about how you might make the most of the success of your application, please either raise your hand and we'll give you the mic, or type your question in and we'll be happy to try and answer them. We've still got plenty of time for questions. While we're waiting for you to think about any questions you might have, just want to point out, I've put this in the chat, but that website I mentioned for the NIHR Incubator, the link's there in the chat. Thanks to Govind, who I think is on the call, because Govind is just come out of an NIHR Academic Clinical Fellowship and has been working with Archem to get the research section of the website live, and he's worked really hard to make sure that we've got this live. and has got it live for today. So thanks a lot, Govind, for that. It looks fantastic. You can also see a blog from Damien Rowland and a page on how to write a successful PhD application. So they're really helpful resources. So no questions coming in so far. Perhaps we just stop just to have a little bit of discussion ourselves about how to make an excellent application for a fellowship. Charlotte, I'd come back to the point that you made about preparation for this. You talked about PPI and making sure that you give plenty of time for your PPIE, and I'd absolutely echo that, and say that actually I think to write a good application for an NIHR fellowship, it takes you probably something like 6 to 9 months, in my experience. I don't know if that mirrors what your experience is at the Academy.
Yeah, definitely. I say we've had people contact us sort of 2 years in advance of, for a fellowship application, sort of saying, I'm really want to do this, but I want to do a really good job. And they've sort of made the most of, talking to as many people as they can, sort of previous award holders, current award holders. They've, spoken to selection committee members that sit, within their organisation. They've sort of sat down and properly gone through their application with the research design service. I've really gone and spoken to a PPI group about their research and got some feedback and things. But yeah, definitely sort of 6 to 9 months. But then on the other extreme, we've had people sort of ring us sort of 2 weeks before the deadline of a fellowship application saying, oh, I've just seen this and, I've put my project together, but I'm not sure whether it's in remit and things. And, really, we would discourage them from applying for that round because, yeah, they're really not going to be able to put in a competitive fellowship application. So, yeah, so as much time as possible, but we understand obviously everybody's got, a busy career and, lots of other commitments as well. But if it definitely pays dividend if you can put in your application, sort of start thinking about your application, as early as possible.
It sounds like a really long time, 6 to 9 months. And so you think, oh, do you really need to invest that? But actually, if you want a long-term career in research, I mean, it's a really worthwhile investment. You've got to get it right. It's once you get to the fellowship, I think you actually got to make the most of it as well. So it's really important that you do have a project that will allow you to make that a great platform to spring onto the next step. And also, I'd say on that, don't be afraid to put your ideas into the bin if they're not good enough. So before I applied for the NIHR postdoctoral fellowship, that was an annual round, and there was also an annual round for clinician scientist applications, which I was eligible for after my PhD. And I prepared an application for the clinician scientist, but as it got close to the deadline, I just wasn't happy with it. There were just too many methodological flaws in the project. There were just too many things that weren't coming together. And I decided not to apply and completely scrapped that project idea, which was actually possibly one of the best decisions I ever made because it wasn't right. And the next time round, it was miles better. We've got a couple of questions now. Sorry, Charlotte, I'll let you comment on that.
No, I was just going to say because we have now introduced, so if for whatever reason you put in an application for a doctoral fellowship, for example, if for whatever reason you are unsuccessful, you are then only able to apply one further time. Before then, we would ask you to wait 3 years because the committee are really looking for you to, if you are unsuccessful that first time, to really take on board the feedback that you will get in terms of, what was good about your application and where you fell down. So they really want you to focus on taking on board that feedback before you then put in another application. So yeah, definitely don't rush an application. Really, if you don't feel ready, don't put it in just to see how it goes. Really take the time to put in an application that you're happy with and that you feel will be competitive. Yeah.
Great. So we've got 3 questions and 6 minutes. So let's get through these. Bongi, can one apply for a fellowship halfway through a clinical doctorate, i.e. for the final thesis or research project only? So 1 year remaining. Good question. So you're halfway through a clinical doctorate. I'm guessing that's a PhD. And if so, I think I know the answer to that one, and that it's not a good time to apply for a fellowship. You need to wait because you can apply for an NIHR doctoral fellowship, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Charlotte. within the first year of a PhD that's funded by other means, and then you can transfer across. But for the postdoctoral fellowships, you have to be at least within, correct, you'll know the answer to this one, Charlotte, but is it 6 months of submission?
I'm sorry, it's all gone very strange on the line.
Ah, sorry, that may be my internet connection.
I think you're correct. I think, Bongi, you're probably better off if you want to do an NIHR pathways, finishing your clinical doctorate in the program that you're in, and then looking at the postdoctoral pathway after you've done that. I don't think you can. I'm fairly sure Charlotte will advise you can't transfer it that late in the day.
Yeah, so let's move on to the second question. I hope that answers the question, Bongi. From Betty, do you have any advice about whether to apply for a doctoral fellowship or ICA clinical doctoral research fellowship, please? They both seem similar. Are there many differences? So this is from Betty, who's a paramedic, who's already completed an MSc. Charlotte, I think you may be best to answer that one, are you?
I don't know whether Charlotte's still there. I agree, Betty, that there are a lot of similarities. We just had one paramedic this year that applied for both and got offered both. I think you probably need to speak to Charlotte direct or the NIHR direct around your topic to see which one they might advise if they felt there was a difference.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can follow up on that, Betty, if it needs be, and we can help. Obviously, might be a good idea, as Julia said, to chat with the NIHR Academy. We've got a question in the chat here. The intervention I would propose for my CDRF would be focused on NHS ambulance staff as the service user. So Dr. Cottrell's confirmed that would be okay for a CDRF as improvement of patient care as a secondary outcome. Would a staff reference group be acceptable as the main PPI support? PPI would also be incorporated too, but would be less meaningful than staff input. That's an interesting question. And as I understand it, actually, there's a move towards calling it more like stakeholder involvement for exactly the reason that that particular project, you know, great to have some patient and public involvement, but the key thing is actually the stakeholders who are the staff. So as I understand it, you're really talking then about stakeholder involvement. Is that what everyone else in the panel would agree with?
It certainly would be my understanding. And again, someone who was successful last year had a similar situation where patients, of course, are going to be the beneficiaries of what happens in that research, but it was actually a staff stakeholder group that was the most informative, really, in the development of that research proposal. So,
yeah, I think provided you can make it very clear in the application or the proposal that the benefits to the end user, i.e. the patients, are going to be demonstrated, then I think using, as Rick referred to, the kind of stakeholder group is fine.
Great, so with 2 minutes left, we can give a very quick answer to this last question from Greta. If you're active in various local research projects and looking to focus in on a particular theme for a doctoral fellowship application, are there particular themes or strands of EM research that the NIHR are looking to promote research in that you can use as a guide to shaping your application, such as the Future Research Themes Framework or Strategy for EM in particular? Well, you know what, this links really nicely with what we had to say as a closing note, because one of the reasons why we were very keen to set this call up so quickly, because we had the idea maybe 4 weeks ago, is because there's a themed call around urgent and emergency care injuries and accidents at the moment. You have to be quick, so the closing date is April for some of the fellowships. So bearing in mind what we said before, that doesn't give you a lot of time to prepare an application, but it is at the moment a priority area for the NIHR Academy. So you might want to tap into that. Heather, Julia, anything else to say on priorities for the NIHR? And
no, I think if you look at the NIHR website, there are a number of sort of cross-cutting or ongoing themes, and actually acute care is on there. So it depends on what your research area is, but yeah, you can use things like, there are themes that are repetitive, if you like, so dementia is one of them, complex illnesses and acute care. So if you miss the urgent emergency care call and can slot it into one of those other ongoing themes, then do look at the website there, it does tell you what they are.
Yeah, and additionally to that, it is stressing on the website that urgent and emergency care is welcome into any of the calls.
Yeah.
You know, that are open calls. So as Rick said, I mean, you've got to weigh up the pros and cons, I think, of rushing an application if the deadline, if you're going for PCAF, for instance, the deadline being, I think, at the end of February or early March, you may not have time to give yourself the quality proposal that you really want. And as we heard earlier, that you only actually get 2 shots at these things. So be sure you're ready to go.
Yeah, and on that, by the way, I don't think we ever have a hard time proving that there's a clinical need for emergency care when we've got a good research idea, because it's such a burden on the health service and an important issue for patients. So you can always make that case. We've come up. Sorry, go on, Charlotte.
Oh, I was just going to say, can people hear? Because I, unfortunately, just for a fair few minutes lost. I don't know. I was having to reconnect or do something, so apologies about that. Now I'm glad I'm back now. So yeah, in terms of emergency care applications, yeah, the Academy would definitely encourage, you know, whether obviously the injuries, accidents and urgent and emergency care theme call that's obviously live at the moment is obviously putting a spotlight on emergency care, and obviously you know, we would encourage applications during this time, but we welcome them throughout the year. The theme call it's really just putting a spotlight on it. There's not necessarily priority given to those. So if you are thinking of putting in an application, definitely don't rush it just to be part of this theme call, because throughout, all the fellowships that we run, at the various different times that they open and close, we would always encourage applications in emergency care, because they, it very much is a fellowship that is, driven what we call response mode. So, by yourself. So if you think there's a need for a piece of research and, you're wanting to develop your career, put it in, don't just hold off, or rush it to put in for this theme call. So yeah, definitely. Thanks
a lot. So on that note, I think it's time to say thanks to Julia, Heather and Charlotte for joining the panel and your fantastic expert insights, and to everybody for joining. Fantastic engagement. It's great to have you all here. We've got a survey that hopefully after you've exited the webinar, you'll be directed to, which looks a bit like a sort of chat bot. And if you wouldn't mind just sharing some insights about what you think we could do next. We talked about having a virtual conference, for example, and we could have a face-to-face meeting, more of these. We'd really like to know what you think would be useful. So thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll hope to speak to you soon. Good luck if you apply for fellowships in this round.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is everyone else gone?
I don't know is the answer to that.